To say that it has not been a great week for the DOJ would be, well, an understatement. Special counsel Jack Smith wanting to, if you will, put into warp drive the Supreme Court, making a decision about whether or not Donald Trump did commit insurrection and that he can be charged for the actions that he did while president, also caused Team Trump, in an ongoing series of appeals that he cannot be charged with insurrection, has caused the judge in this case to say, time out. Jack Smith, you can no longer continue to submit witnesses or continue on this trial, and the likelihood of it happening in March is now completely out the window because we have to let the Trump appeals play out. And the Supreme Court, though they may be able to step in and say, well, of course, if a president commits something like treason against the United States, well, certainly he can be charged, but you haven't even presented an evidence or a case yet, so how on earth do we make that determination regarding what it is? And if what you've got is all you got, we can make a decision, and Mr. Smith, it's probably not going to go in your favor. So that's what's happened this week to the Department of Justice, which only fuels the fact that Vivek Ramaswamy, the only other Republican running for the nomination, has been the only one to have the guts to say the obvious.
Why am I the only person on the stage, at least, who can say that January 6th now does look like it was an inside job?
Where are you, Chris Christie? Oh, that's right. You keep saying Trump is going to be in jail shortly after the first of the year. Where are you on this, Nikki Haley? Oh, that's right. You're too busy war profiteering from all of your arms and military contracts that you made since being the ambassador to the United Nations, thus making you and your husband multimillionaires. Hey, where are you on this, Ron DeSantis? Oh, that's right. I forgot. You are a mild form of the deep state, but you're deep state nonetheless. Yeah. Let's go ahead and go there tonight.
Let's get ready to rumble! You can't handle the truth.
Hi, I'm Pastor Marty. This is the Afternoon Drive. Absolutely positively nothing else like it or me anywhere else online or in alternative media. You have got the one, the only, the original, so never settle for a cheap imitation. Hey, please like this channel. Make sure you are subscribed to this channel. And then once you are, smack the bell, click the word all to receive notification of my rants, my ravings, and of course, my undeniably flawless reasonings. Then like and share this video. That's how we get the word out that we're here. Thank you for tuning in to the Afternoon Drive. Saying that the media is losing its mind over Vivek Ramaswamy continuing to make this assertion that what happened on January 6th was, quote, an inside job. Some have referred to it as a Fedsurrection. I've told you in the past what people that I knew who were actually there witnessed. In fact, they said it was very eerie the day they were there on that fateful day that there was relative calm. They thought that there was a very much underwhelming presence of police and security, but everything was friendly and the police were exceptionally friendly and directing people and getting people up to the Capitol and as close as they wanted to be. And yet we know that on that day, supposedly all hell broke loose and we watched the deep state spring into action. We've got video footage now of Nancy Botox Pelosi's daughter, Alexandra Pelosi, the independent filmmaker. She was caught on hidden camera admitting that there really no was there. It just didn't happen, that this so-called insurrection of these MAGA Second Amendment gun nuts showed up for an insurrection and left all their guns at home. And we have the QAnon shaman who is now running for Congress. He just did a lengthy interview with Jimmy Dore. And you've got You've got people on the left now that understand what happened on January 6th. And by the way, we know that the narrative right now is to jump into action by CNN and even faux pas news, formerly known as Fox News, and say this is yet another wingnut conspiracy. Yet it was 2 years ago, it was the New York Times that first broke the story that there were feds in the crowd that day, dressed as Trump supporters. So, with that in mind, Vivek Ramaswamy proving that the rest of the GOP field wanting to be the nominee for president is working in collusion with the left, with the Department of Justice, with the alphabet communities, that this is the only shot they've got to take down Donald Trump. And Vivek is calling them on it, and he's bringing receipts.
Why am I the only person on the stage, at least, who can say that January 6th now does look like it was an inside job? That the government lied to us for 20 years about Saudi Arabia's involvement in 9/11? That the Great Replacement theory is not some grand right-wing conspiracy theory, but a basic statement of the Democratic Party's platform? That the 2020 election was indeed stolen by big tech? That the 2016 election, the one that Trump won for sure, was also one that was stolen from him by the national security establishment that actually put up the Trump-Russia collusion hoax that they knew was false. There's a reason why I'm the only person on the stage who can say these things. That's what it's going to take, not people who are licking his boots one time and now Monday morning quarterbacking him and criticizing him when it's convenient.
He recently appeared in a CNN town hall. It was their town hall. They invited him. And the host was just incredibly antagonistic and annoying. And she kept going after him about this whole inside job and you have no proof, no proof, no proof. Well, you see, because she's so used to reading from the talking points provided to her by the script writers, because they're not really reporters, they just take CIA and other alphabet community talking points and report it as if it's news. She's unable, apparently, to insert tab A into slot B. It just seems to be beyond her ability to look at what's obvious in front of you and make the conclusion. So Vivek spells it out very carefully for her, and he makes this brilliant statement.
Let me ask you about something that you said at the debate last week. You used the phrase inside job to describe what happened on January 6th.
We do have a government, first of all, we have to acknowledge, that has lied to us systematically over the last several years about the origin of COVID-19, about the Hunter Biden laptop that we were told was false by 51 CIA experts and otherwise before we now know that it was true. You can go straight down the list, the Trump-Russia disinformation collusion hoax, all of it. Now we come to January 6th. The reality is we know that there were federal law enforcement agents in that field. We don't know how many. I think it's shameful. If I may finish just answering.
Well, let me
this is really important.
I'm going to go ahead and interrupt you here because
I know this establishment doesn't approve of this message. I know
that there were federal agents.
We should be able to talk about this.
You're saying that there were federal agents.
This is important to talk about.
You are saying there were federal agents in the crowd on January 6th.
Yep.
There is no evidence that there were federal agents in the crowd on January 6th.
So why, before Congress, when pressed on what the number was, they didn't say there were none? They just couldn't say how many there were.
He's like, you keep saying there were no agents there. You have no proof that there were agents. The FBI director himself never said that there weren't agents. He just refuses us to tell how many. Remember, it was Congressman Clay Higgins that really put this to Director Wray.
Does the FBI have confidential human sources? Did the FBI have confidential human sources embedded within the January 6th protesters on January 6th of 2021?
Well, Congressman, as I'm sure you can appreciate, I have to be very careful about what I can say about when.
Even now, because that's what you told us 2 years ago.
May I finish? About when we do and do not, and where we have and have not used confidential human sources. But to the extent that there's a suggestion, for example, that the FBI's confidential human sources or FBI employees in some way instigated or orchestrated January 6th, that's categorically false.
Did you have confidential human sources dressed as Trump supporters inside the Capitol on January the 6th prior to the doors being open?
Again, I had to be very careful.
It should be a no. Can you not tell the American people no? We did not have confidential human sources dressed as Trump supporters positioned inside the Capitol.
Gentleman's time has expired.
You should not read anything into my decision not to share information.
Director Wray,
confidential human
gentleman's
sources.
time has expired.
Boom. And then Vivek did the obvious. He laid it out. How many times has the government lied to us? And again, we get called conspiracy nuts when we bring this up. Remember the vile things we were called just a couple of years ago during the pandemic? And if you said anything contrary to the narrative, you were anti-science, etc., etc., etc. And now on how many of those points have we been proven absolutely 100% right? Some of us 2 years ago started talking about something that happened that day on January 6th. 2 and 2 aren't making 4 here. And so much of the video footage we actually saw, these people look like junior high kids on a field trip to the Capitol, staying inside the velvet rope lines, pointing, looking, taking pictures. The QAnon shaman actually volunteered to the police to help them stop people from misbehaving. That's why he was in the building. That's why they were escorting him around the building. Over 200 hours of video that we weren't allowed to see. And they cherry-picked, and then they put together a J6 committee with people like Liz Cheney. And again, we weren't allowed to see everything, but they had this assertion of what happened, despite the fact that we have the president tweeting and even doing a video, go home. We support the police. Remember that? We support the police. We will be peaceful. He said in his speech, we will march down to the Capitol peacefully. By the way, let's be clear. Alan Dershowitz, who is representing some of these people who have been arrested, said, quote, he thinks Donald Trump really did lose the election and there was nothing to protest, but he supports these people's right to protest, and them standing there protesting is not insurrection. It is not trying to overthrow the government. Does anybody really believe that day that even the events that were cherry-picked that they were showing us, again, we have Nancy Pelosi's daughter talking about on camera that her mother and others purposely made sure that the Capitol Police and the security and even the National Guard could not get there. Could not get there. You have the former director of the Capitol Police on with Tucker Carlson talking about all of the protocols changed about just a few weeks before this all happened. And he said, I no longer had any authority to call in extra reinforcements, that authority had been stripped from me by Nancy Pelosi and, ready for it, drum roll, yeah, Mitch McConnell. These swamp rats, I don't care whether they got an R by their name for Republican or a D for Democrat. They are deep state. They are part of the ruling class establishment. Donald Trump is an existential threat to them, not to democracy. Donald Trump is the one that is actually restoring the government to we the people. Did you see that the New York Post has just referred to the Boston Tea Party as an act of white terrorism? I kid you not. As they continue to do revisionist history, as they continue to strip us of our rights but tell us that Donald Trump is the fascist? No, Donald Trump is restoring we the people. How dare you, according to the ruling class, think that you actually get a vote and a say? The power brokers will say it for you. You'll own nothing, you'll eat bugs, and you will like it. So, Vivek Ramaswamy took her for a little stroll down memory lane and said, remember all the things we've been lied to about repeatedly, consistently? Do you remember?
why did they suppress footage of now what's been released, 200 hours of footage of shooting rubber bullets into that crowd, shooting tear gas into that crowd? You didn't see that before. You saw what the response was to that. Now you see footage coming out of actually rolling out the red carpet for Capitol Police allowing people in,
again,
right through the front
door. The vast majority of
that
the
video evidence should have been released before, Abby.
Mr. Ramaswamy, the vast majority of the footage shows police officers being overrun
and I want to talk about one more
by
case.
violent
this is really important.
rioters. That's
I'm going to give you some hard facts.
Of it shows.
So here's what entrapment is.
Cherry pick.
I'm not cherry picking. If I may finish, Abby. If I may finish, Abby. I'm not cherry picking.
Examples.
To the contrary. To the contrary.
You know who cherry picked?
You know who cherry picked? The government.
That is what happened.
The government cherry picked 12 hours of footage when there was 200 hours of footage. So cherry picking was the government, not me. Release the whole thing. And let me just finish one thing too, because this is super important as a topic.
So
I think this is a civil libertarian issue of our time. Gretchen Whitmer's kidnapping. I want to be really clear on this, because it's the same issue in the same FBI, same even part of the FBI. 3 people who were in an alleged plot to kidnap Gretchen Whitmer were acquitted at the end of trial because it was entrapment. That is, government agents put them up to do something they otherwise wouldn't have done. Same thing with the Capitol Police. People letting them in freely. Many of those people then being charged.
Look,
the government cannot put you up to do something and then charge you for it. That's wrong.
I don't want to have
to the left or the right.
I don't want to have to. I don't want to have.
So kudos to Vivek Ramaswamy. Some people have said he's doing this to try to, become Trump's VP. I don't know that Trump would pick Vivek to be his VP, but one thing Vivek is definitely setting himself up as, that he is not establishment, that he is not part of the ruling class ilk. I don't know what his bigger end game here is, but at least thank God that he is in there truth bombing, and because of the truth bombing, that's the real reason the GOP doesn't want to have any more debates, because he keeps qualifying to be there. And have you ever noticed that the headlines the next day and the sound bites the next day are never anything over bloviating Chris Christie has to say? That beached whale can't even stand up on his own. He's got to lean on the podium because he hasn't got the strength to stand anymore. He still thinks he's Tony Soprano, a mob boss from Jersey. And nobody's quoting Nikki Haley. Nobody's quoting Ron DeSantis. Nobody's doing that. But man, the sound bites and the talk the next day is always about Vivek, Vivek, Vivek. So thank you. Now, it was Congressman Clay Higgins in his questioning of Director Wray of the FBI. Hey, Director, tell us about ghost buses. And of course, the director's like, I have no idea what you're talking about.
Are you familiar with you know what a ghost vehicle is? Director of the FBI certainly should. You know what a ghost bus is?
A ghost bus?
Ghost bus.
I'm not sure I've used that term before.
Okay. Well, it's pretty common in law enforcement. It's a vehicle that's used for secret purposes. It's painted over. These 2 buses in the middle here, they were the first to arrive at Union Station on January 6th, 0500. I have all this evidence. I'm showing you a tip of this iceberg.
Mr. Chairman.
These 2 buses are painted completely white.
Point of order.
This is a very significant hearing, Mr. Chairman, and these buses are nefarious in nature and were filled with FBI informants dressed as Trump supporters. And deployed onto our Capitol on January 6th. Your day is coming, Mr. Wray.
Wow. Just as he starts to make the point, sorry, you're out of time. But in a recent interview, he walked us through and laid out what they've got.
2 buses, and they had like some kind of discussion, a briefing, like the way the military leader would address his troops.
Yeah, they call it a huddle.
And then they together went to the escalators and up in the Union Station and were gone.
And they were all men.
They were all men in all the Trump regalia. These men were in really good shape. They made comments like, wow, these are real serious Trump supporters, these guys. And they said they all had elbow pads and knee pads. And they appeared like they had common equipment, but they were not in uniform. But they behaved in a uniform manner. And we intend to get all of that video evidence from Union Station, from the escalators, from the parking lot. We have other eyewitnesses, much to the chagrin of everybody that was in those buses and everyone who commanded them to be there. We've identified one of those buses. And you know what that means? That means that's their because a bus is a serial numbered vehicle. And in America, the change of ownership of a serial numbered vehicle is documented. So that means we can begin to trace from the original owner of that bus, where it was sold and who bought it, and then who it was leased to and where it disappeared. And then eventually those buses were removed from the Union Station, and we're going to document all of that.
So you believe that those buses held undercover officers, not informants, correct?
I feel very, very confident that everybody that was on those two buses were FBI assets. And I have a high degree of belief that they were actual FBI agents. And I'm sorry to say, ma'am, my objective conclusion is that senior officials at the FBI were deeply involved.
Well, to set the record straight, the New York Times said it first. The New York Times pointed out that Ray Epps was more than likely an asset. The New York Times was the first media outlet to expose the fact that there were agents dressed as supporters acting as provocateurs. It wasn't some right-wing media outlet. It wasn't some alternative media outlet. It was the New York Times that first said it. And Vivek Ramaswamy is just putting the exclamation point to it.
Why am I the only person on the stage, at least, who can say that January 6th now does look like it was an inside job?